Self-proclaimed anti-war President Donald Trump has recently said that if Iran doesn't come to an agreement on their nuclear program, he will bomb them. And it won't just be any bombing. No, according to Trump, it will be bombing the likes of which they have never seen before. Indeed, the lives of countless Iranian civilians are now apparently hinged upon Trump's restraint or not during negotiations, which is a position no one really wants to be in. In addition to bombs, Trump threatened the Islamic Republic with secondary tariffs as well and more sanctions. All of this was triggered by Iran's rejection of holding direct talks with the US, instead saying that they're open to indirect diplomacy. Of course, one can't blame the Iranians for distrusting Trump, since he was the one to pull the US out of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, that was signed with Iran back during the Obama days. He pulled out in 2018 and directed his administration to immediately begin the process of reimposing sanctions related to the JCPOA. Throw in Israel's desire for an all-out war with Iran into the mix, and you have a recipe for an even bigger crisis in the Middle East than the one taking place already. So what happens next? And was this what people expected from America's supposedly first anti-forever wars president? Joining me now to discuss all of this and more is award-winning author and expert on US-Iran relations, Trita Parsi, from the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. Trita, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
So, a lot going on. Let's just start with what he said on Meet the Press not too long ago. How seriously should we take Trump's threat to bomb Iran in a major way?
I think we have to take it absolutely seriously. Not because I think he actually wants to. I do believe that he actually wants a deal. But he may be trapping himself here in a position in which the Iranians are likely not going to respond positively to that type of bombastic demands. We have a very clear history of evidence of that. And that he will then be left in a position in which he feels like he has to do something for his own credibility. I do think that the biggest problem, though, right now, in terms of getting to some sort of a deal, is not him making these type of threats. Those are not helpful. I think that's highly problematic beyond the fact that, he doesn't have authority from Congress. He doesn't have, any legal standing internationally.
No, that seems to stop him on other issues.
But doesn't seem to care about that. I think the bigger problem right now actually is that he started off saying, look, I want to get a deal and my only red line is the nuclear program. No nuclear weapon. That actually works because that's what the deal was in the past.
Yep.
But then on February 4th, he signed this memo that started talking about dismantling the nuclear program, Libya style, ending all of Iran's relations with all of its different partners in the region, from Hezbollah to the Houthis, as well as closing down Iran's missile program. If that is the basis for talks, there's not going to be any talks. That's actually a bigger obstacle right now to getting somewhere than these bombastic threats, because I think a lot of countries, and including the Iranians, are discounting a lot of those threats. Not in the sense that they don't take them seriously, they're preparing, but they understand that that's part of the noise that Trump seems to want to do. But his actual negotiating position is more important. If those are his positions, we're going to probably gravitate towards conflict.
Dan Hodges of the Daily Mail in the UK published an article last week that claims he was told by senior political, military and diplomatic sources while he was in Israel, the United States and Israel are preparing to launch a strike on Iran that will finally eradicate the threat posed by the country's nuclear weapons program. It doesn't have a nuclear weapons program as far as we know, but that's the Daily Mail. Have you heard anything that confirms that America and Israel have already done the deal to bomb Iran?
No, I don't think that is the case. I think there is a very intense debate going on inside the administration right now. Those who are much more committed towards getting a deal, and those who are pushing the very same strategy that Bolton, Pompeo, Brian Hook put in place, that was designed to make diplomacy fail so that war would be the only option. That's what you have with this memo.
Yeah.
It's going for demands they know the Iranians are going to reject because they want the rejection in order to go to war. And you have others in the administration who are pushing for more realistic demands in order to get a deal. So take a look at, for instance, what Witkoff said to Tucker Carlson in his interview. He talked about a verification-based deal, as well as that it would be very technical. Any deal that is just going for the dismantlement of the program is not going to be particularly technical, and it's not going to be particularly verification-based. A verification-based that is very technical, you know what that sounds like? A different version of the JCPOA, which means that what he's pushing for is a completely different approach, an approach that I think can work, but not, again, if they're going for these completely maximalist demands designed to fail.
So on that, you told the New Arab outlet in January that contrary to all the buzz that was spread by hawks in Washington, Trump had no plan to return to maximum pressure, but appears eager to start diplomacy with Iran and strike a deal. Do you think that assessment is still true? Because he is doing maximum pressure right now. Liking this video? Then don't just watch. Hit like, share, and subscribe. And tap the bell so you never miss a video or live show. But if you want early access to exclusive content, then you have to head to zeteo.com and subscribe now. You'll be supporting fearless, independent journalism.
Yeah, so it was true at the time, because at the time you had an effort by the Hawks to try to give the impression that this was a done deal, that he's going to go for maximum pressure, and I think they were hoping to make sure that the Iranians would lash out and make this a whole self-fulfilling prophecy. And as you may have noted, the person who was pushing for that maximum pressure strategy was fired on day one of the Trump administration. But since Trump signed the memo on February 4th, and you may remember that press conference, says, I really don't want to do this, but they're telling me that I have to. So he kind of poo-pooed it, but nevertheless, it had a tremendously negative effect.
I feel like a lot of people in diplomatic circles, on the left, even on some parts of the kind of MAGA right, believed that Trump would somehow be less hawkish, less neoconservative, less gung-ho than a Joe Biden or a Kamala Harris, would be less pro-Israel even. And yet that was all wrong. In fact, in February, you wrote a piece headlined, Trump's peace efforts should be a wake-up call for Dems, and that he's running circles around the left, you said. This is the man who, since that peace, Trita, has allowed Israel to violate the ceasefire, kill hundreds of Palestinian children, while he himself was bragging just the other day about bombing and killing hundreds of people in Yemen who may or may not have been Houthi fighters. Do you feel a little bit naive, a little bit foolish to have put that Trump's peace efforts? I went back and read it. I thought, I wonder how he feels now. Yeah. That you thought he was anti-war or pro-peace. No, someone was like, come on, he wasn't.
The full piece, if you see what I wrote there, is talking about the fact that he went out there and he was making statements such as peace is the most important element of my legacy. Of course. What did the Dems say? What I was trying to point out in this piece is, and I say, undeservingly or not, he's taking the space of claiming that he's the peace candidate.
And he did that during the campaign, right?
Whereas
he went to Michigan.
Kamala Harris goes around and says, hold on. I want the most lethal military force in the world. Don't use the word peace. I went back and looked, and the last time you actually had someone getting close to using that language was Obama saying, I don't want stupid words.
So we can agree
But the point of that article is the Dems need to step up
space for him
and actually make sure that they're taking the space instead of leaving it empty for someone who may not at all deserve it, and particularly mindful of what you're saying. That's a strong case to be made, but the space was left empty by the Dems.
So I half agree with you. You're right. The space was left. We don't disagree on that. The criticism of Harris, totally legitimate. And he did go to Michigan, remember, before the election, said, I'm going to be the peace candidate. Liz Cheney wants to drag Muslims into wars. I'm going to be the anti-war guy. All lies. My problem is, you can say the Democrats left a space without ever accepting the idea that he's some kind of peace guy or anti-war guy. When you say Trump's peace efforts, that implies there's some good faith to it, that they're real. I mean, that ceasefire was fake from the get-go. It was just for the inauguration. He was never going to restrain Netanyahu. We're talking to each other on a day that Netanyahu's been welcomed to DC with a red carpet. So he kind of did fool a lot of people who thought, oh, maybe he'll be less hawkish than Harris and Biden, and here we are, 200 children killed in 24 hours?
I'm trying to remember exactly the article, but what I'm talking about there is what he was saying about Ukraine and other places.
And Gaza.
And Gaza as well.
Did you believe that was a real ceasefire?
I believed, well, let me tell you one thing. It will be out in the news, but something happened when Witkoff went to Israel, and the reporting was that he said, I want to meet with Netanyahu. Yeah. They said no, because it's Shabbat, and I say, I don't care about Shabbat. Well, something else happened there in which the U.S. actually used the leverage that Biden was never willing to use to get the ceasefire.
But where's that leverage now? They're massacring hundreds of Palestinians.
Now he's shifted back, and I think is absolutely problematic. However, at the time, pointing out that this is something, a major shift.
Isn't this the problem with Trump? You can't take him in the moment. He's always going to shift. He's always going to let you down.
I'm not pinning my hope on Trump. I'm pinning on the hope that perhaps there are forces within the administration that ultimately will go in the right direction.
Yes.
On Gaza right now, I think is absolutely problematic. On Iran, I think the jury is out. I think there's an opportunity. And I said this on your show.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was on the show or whether we were talking afterwards, that the difference between between Biden, Harris, and Trump would be that the gambit with Trump would be overwhelming. It could go from full-scale war to a deal. Whereas if it would be Harris or Biden, it would be essentially the status quo. The most unlikely outcomes would be war or a deal. So you were in a situation right now, and I've said it on this show, and I think it's still the same. He could go in both directions.
The risk of war right now is higher.
The risk of war is higher, absolutely. The opportunity for a deal is also way higher than it ever was under the Biden administration. It's the status quo is the least likely.
How much of this is driven by Israel's desire for an all-out war with Iran? After all, many in Israel, as well as Trump, claim Iran was behind October the 7th. How much do you think that Netanyahu's in DC right now? How much do you think that's driving all of this?
I find it very unlikely that there is any other force even close to that of Netanyahu driving this at this point, with the exception of some elements inside the administration who has essentially been on the same page as Netanyahu and Israel.
What about Gulf forces?
No, this is a huge shift that has happened right now. Neither the Emiratis or the Saudis are in anywhere close to pushing it in the same way that they were doing 10 years ago. It's a very important differentiation here as well. In the sense that their focus has shifted elsewhere. Israel is really alone as the one country that is pushing for this. And again, there are elements inside the U.S. government as well that is aligned with the Israeli view. What I think is also very important, and take a look at what Tucker Carlson tweeted today, for instance, just about an hour ago, saying that I think the end line was any country that is pushing the United States into war with Iran is not a friend, it's an enemy. You have very strong forces that Trump does listen to that recognize that this is a huge problem and they shouldn't go in that direction. Trump himself tweeted a video, as you may recall, during the transition that accused Netanyahu, rightfully, of being one of the key forces behind the Iraq war.
But again, you can't put any stock in. He changes from day to day. It doesn't matter what he tweeted.
It certainly does. But this is the situation we're in right now. What do you want to do? Just go back and assume the worst all the time? No, you got to take advantage of whatever opportunities.
But you shouldn't also assume that this man has any interest in peace.
And I don't think I've made any assumptions that everything is going to work out fine.
Because I watch him bombing Yemen. He's killed more people in Yemen in his first 3 months than Biden killed in all of 2024, according to stats. Like, that kind of stuff is shocking.
It's shocking, it's horrible, and beyond that, I don't know if it's true, but there is some reporting saying that he's even considered ground troops. That is exactly what many of the restrainers have warned about, which is you start off with something that, first of all, has nothing to do with U.S. interests. And you saw from some of the signal groups, those were also arguments that was used there, that, this is
private,
the Europeans.
they agree.
But then they went down this path, and if they continue on this path, they may actually get trapping themselves into something that brings ground forces into Yemen.
Just explain, as the expert on this issue, explain to our viewers one important point that often gets lost in all of this. Whether Iran has a nuclear weapon or not, and everyone seriously agrees they don't, whether they're trying to get one or not, which is the great debate for the last 20 years, there is no military solution to this, is there? When people talk about going in and bombing the nuclear program, what does that actually mean? Because can't they just reconstitute it straight after? In fact, wouldn't they be more likely after being bombed to start a nuclear weapons program?
And here I think, the Israelis are actually kind of frank about it. They never said that there is a military one-time solution. They've all along said that it would entail repeated attacks over the course of years.
Mowing the lawn in Iran, like Gaza.
Exactly. I mean, mowing the entire region at this point. Look what they're doing in Syria as well. So there's never really been that type of a military solution. And there isn't a military program. And again, just look at what the Trump administration's own threat assessment said that came out, was it 2 weeks or so ago, repeated what has been said before. There is no active military program.
But if they were to be bombed, that might kick one off.
Well, not only that, what we have seen over the course of the last 2 years, because of Gaza, because of the fact that one of the main miscalculations the Iranians did is that they never believed the United States would go in so full out in favor of Israel and take away all of the restraints on Israel. Biden did that already. Trump is continuing it. Perhaps he's taken off even more restraints. That was a major miscalculation from their end. And all of that has really changed the debate inside of Iran. You have far more voices now inside of Iran saying, actually, don't negotiate. You have to build a bomb.
But on that basis, one of the big questions about Iran is how strong or weak is Iran right now, militarily? Because the argument in the past from restrainers in the West, from anti-war voices, were not just if you bomb Iran, it's more likely to lead to a nuclear weapon, but also it will kick off World War III. It will kick off a conflagration in the region we've never seen before. Iran will respond with Hezbollah, with Houthis, with Hamas, with Assad. Assad's gone. Hamas has its own issues in Gaza. Hezbollah's lost its leader. Houthis are being bombed right now. Is Iran in a uniquely weak position? Because a lot of people are arguing in Israel, now's the time to strike. Iran's weak. What do you say to that argument?
So that's the part of the Israeli argument that they're making to the White House right now, saying the Iranians are, as you said, uniquely weak, and as a result...
And is it true, is what I'm wondering?
I don't think it is true. I think the Iranians, without a doubt, are in a weaker position regionally, as you pointed out, what's happening with Hezbollah, and more importantly, Syria. Hamas was never part of the larger, deterrence that the Iranians had built. Not even were the Houthis. The Houthis have now become much more important because of the loss of Syria and Hezbollah. But on the nuclear front, they are way ahead than they were in 2015. They're way ahead when Trump first came into office back in 2016. In fact, they're way ahead because Trump pulled out of the nuclear deal. So now they have 60%, they have a far larger stockpile. So yes, they have lost some assets in the region, without a doubt. Regionally, they're much weaker. On the nuclear front, they have much more leverage than they did before. And we do not yet know exactly what their own military strength is in terms of could they still create a tremendous amount of dangers. I would suspect that they can. And I say this based on the fact that at the end of the day, despite the fact that many of their throwing missiles at Israel was much for show, but the second attack in October, you had a very large number of their missiles penetrating all layers of Israel's air defenses, to the point that the Israelis asked for 2 THAAD battery systems, which is the most advanced military anti-air missile system that exists in the world. They wouldn't have done that if the Iranians were not successful. And that was targeting Israel, which is a very relatively small piece of territory. If they were to use that against a large number of bases throughout the region, etc., I suspect that given what they've demonstrated, they're still actually very capable not to have this capacity of projecting force offensively, but in terms of being attacked and inflicting significant damage, I think it would be a huge mistake to discount that just because they've lost, Hezbollah or they lost Hamas.
We can only hope that the restraining voices, you say, in the administration win that battle. Trita Parsi from the Quincy Institute, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to zeteo.com. Your support matters.